Okay, we have a really interesting show for you today. A lot of women who are trying to beat drugs, beat their, life-debilitating habits. A lot of them who've been saved by their own children. So it should be interesting. Patrice Gaines had a 6-year-old daughter, was married to 3 physically abusive men, was beaten, was raped, addicted to heroin, jailed for drug possession, all by the time she was 26 years old. But she's turned her life around and is now an award-winning reporter for the Washington Post and the author of this book, Laughing in the Dark, From Colored Girl to a Woman of Color. Patrice says, that's worth a little applause, isn't it? Bravo. Patrice says it was the need to be a good parent for her daughter, Andrea, that made her change. Now, Andrea remembers some of what her mother went through, but she has managed not to repeat her mother's mistakes. She's a college graduate now and works in public relations. So, what was the long journey out?
Well, it was a long journey, and I certainly could relate to what these women are saying here today. I think I particularly could relate to Charmaine because I wasn't sure that I was an addict, too, because I was functioning, because I was her mother and I was able to help her with homework. And yet, I believe we all share self-hatred. I heard someone else, I heard you all mention about what you think about yourselves. And so I had to learn to love myself, and that was what took a long time. And as I learned to love myself, I learned to depend on the drugs less and less. As I learned to think of myself as being more godly, I learned that I had to protect myself. Now, one of the things that I found was that being in drugs...
Yeah, when you recognize you are spirit, come from a greater spirit,
yes,
makes
and
it a lot
that spirit
easier.
is in me, and it's up to me to protect that spirit also, and to demand that that spirit be respected. Because one of my problems was in my choice of men. I don't know about the men in your life, but I could almost probably guess at the kinds of men, because I think that's one of the things, one of the ways we can tell also that we have a problem. It's not just that we function and we can go to work, but that our choices, drugs...
This is so familiar, it makes my head hurt. Yes.
I always felt that I was more addicted to the guy than the drugs. I mean, that later I could really see that what I discovered was when I quit this guy, I didn't do the drugs, and I was living this nice kind of happy life. And yet what I didn't understand was I hadn't fixed inside of me what made me attracted to that kind of guy, and which was what made me not love myself. So I went to another guy who introduced me to another kind of drug. I wanted to say, too, because with all the children talking, I just think children can say things in a way that adults just can't say it, that they can see the truth even when we can't, and that they won't let us fool ourselves. And when I was using drugs, Andrea would show me things that I didn't even know, and there were so many times I feel that she saved my life, and they can save your life if you let them. I went to jail, and the thing to me, the worst part of jail wasn't that there were no clocks and that I couldn't go to the refrigerator and get food, but the worst thing to me was that I couldn't see my daughter, that I couldn't touch my daughter, that I was losing control of, I couldn't have an influence in her life, that I couldn't make those day-to-day decisions for her. And then there were other times when I had men in my life who were abusive, where she knew they were abusive.
That's really the problem with those relationships, that you've given the power of yourself over to the relationship, don't you think, Patrice? In all your cases of being abused.
Oh, yes, and I could really relate, but I think that I always look for power in men, and I think a lot of women do, and I think it comes from being raised as a woman. It seems that we're raised to nurture other people, and we're raised to forgive other people and, take care of other people. So it was a long time before I realized that it was not selfish to love myself, to take care of myself, to think about myself sometimes, even when, like, picking out who to give the best piece of chicken to. You give it to your husband and then the children, and then you take what's left. And the first day, I took the juiciest piece of chicken. I was like, all right, I know I'm on my way,
Yeah, I know. Take whatever step you have to. If it starts with chicken, if it starts with chicken, let it be chicken, yeah. And that's your message, is that there's a journey out, there's a way out.
Oh, there is, and I always start with that whenever I talk to anybody. They can't tell me that it can't be done, because I know. My first drug was heroin. And I know that if I could be...
And how long were you on heroin?
Oh, off and on for probably about 8 to 10 years. Because I was kind of like you. I had stretches when I'd stop, and then I'd start again. And what I had to learn was what was happening in my life when I was doing it. And that was when I was getting very depressed about the whole self-hatred, about why I didn't love myself. And also about because I had surrounded myself with people who thought it was okay to do this, that this was the thing to do. So I had to change all of that. And I think people too often have this one, I noticed when your mother was speaking and she talked about loving you and the kind of person you are, people think that addicts, you know, are dumb or lazy or they're dirty or... No, they're not. You know, we're smart people. It's just that we hate ourselves and we're in pain. And that's not an easy thing to learn or an easy thing to change about yourself. And yet if we do, I want people to know that an addict can be a journalist, you know, that an addict can be an author, you know, that an addict can be on Oprah's show one day. You know, I want them to know that. So don't dismiss those addicts. You know, they have God inside them too.
Well, Patrice Gaines's mother died just 2 months ago, and Patrice says that her mother was also an inspiration for her to get her life together. And I understand it was one of your mother's last wishes for you to share your story on the Oprah show?
Oh, yeah. My mother, that was all she talked about. In fact, she could never say Oprah. She said Oprah. And my daughter would help her with her lessons on pronunciation.
That's your mother? That's a picture?
Yeah, on how to pronounce it. And... you know, she never quite got it right. She said she was going to call you Miss Winfrey on the show, but she knew, I think, she understood what a long journey it was for me, I guess, like Kim's mother, to come from shooting heroin, you know, to be on the Oprah Winfrey show. But it certainly was her dream. And when the limo came up here, I tell you, and brought me up here, there wasn't a dry eye. We just, you know, seeing Harpo Productions and knowing I could go from sitting in a red light shooting heroin, you know, to stepping into the Harpo studio to be on Oprah. It's a long journey, but you can take it. You can take it.
Well, and I think the important thing for everybody to know that there are things in all of our past, but the things do not define who we are. We get a chance every day. That's the grace of God, is that you get a chance every day to redefine who you are. And one of the last pages in your book, you say, as you were on stage, I felt as if God had reached down his hand and raised me up. It was a moment of grace. I love the fact that you use the word grace, because that's exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. A voice in my head said, now, you see, this is why you shot dope. This is why you went to jail. This is why you were so lost, so that you could one day go out and spread the word that there is no greater love than the love of self. I thank you all for being here.